So Shavuot is almost here. I hope you got the email that went out about the offerings that we have coming up um, to celebrate Matan Torah, the receiving of Torah. And so tonight I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to receive Torah? Who do we have to be in order to receive Torah? So this week we begin a new book, the fourth book in the Bible, the fourth book in the Torah, Bamidbar. Literally, Bamidbar means in the wilderness, and it takes over where Exodus left off. Chronologically speaking, it's only been 1 month since the end of the book of Exodus, but we had a whole book of Leviticus that was placed in between. So this book as a whole will cover the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, but the text itself really only focuses on the bookends of the 40-year wandering. The 38 years in between get lost, and we don't hear much more about the people who left the place of suffering of Mitzrayim. They die off, and a new generation arises getting ready to enter into the promised land. And so in these coming weeks, we will learn about what happens in this book. There will be rebellions. Old leadership passes on to new, and priestly ritual leadership moves from one generation to the next. And so some of the questions that I am thinking about and asking of myself as I study this text is, what does it mean to be in the wilderness, to wander in the wilderness, to receive Torah in the wilderness, and to be worthy of entering into the promised land? Bamidbar. And so while some might translate Bamidbar as in the desert, perhaps wilderness is a better fit. While a desert seems barren, a wilderness is teeming with hidden life. And so to move through a wilderness is to step into an unknown space, a curious place full of fear and mystery, and to journey together through uncertain times, facing this wilderness together. And so it is with this our portion and opens up the first line of this fourth book. On the first day of the second month, in the second year, following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, the Eternal One spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting. So there's a beautiful Hasidic teaching called the Noam Elimelech, which reinforces how we can prepare to move about in this wilderness and how we enter into a new book, and how we also prepare to enter into a promised land, and even how we face events that are happening to us in this world right now. By parsing out this opening line, we can learn that if we break it up, the first part of that line, on the first day of the second month, where the Hebrew word month, chodesh, can be translated as meaning new or renew. And this teaches us about the power of renewal, and that it is always possible in every moment. The next part of that line, in the second year following the Exodus, teaches us that a second Exodus is always at hand when we are ready to leave a life that brings more suffering, and then to lead a life towards liberation. And so this practice of renewal and of liberation happens in the wilderness of Sinai, literally no man's land. That is everybody's place. And it is in this place that Torah is given, a perennial wisdom that is a gift for all, anyone and everyone who seeks. It is here in this wilderness that we learn about building a Mishkan, this portable tabernacle that will accompany us throughout the next 40 years. And we will surround it on all sides. And it is in the center of this sacred space that we will have our tent of meeting. That's the last part of this line. And tent of meeting in Hebrew is Ohel Moed. And literally in Ohel Moed means a tent of joy. So this is a reminder that the centerpiece of this journey is to plant joy in our practice and in our seeking. So it is with this approach that we today ready ourselves to receive Torah on Shavuot, to learn what it means to earn the right to dwell in a promised land. Humble in our approach, practicing renewal, paving a way for liberation, and inviting joy into it all. But before leaving Mount Sinai, we are commanded to take a census. This is why the English name is given to this book called Numbers. It comes from the Gemara, talking about the counting of the Israelites. Rashi says, the medieval commentator, because God loves us so much, this is why God repeatedly counts us. Our text says, lift up the heads of the community of the children of Israel according to their families, their ancestral households, counting the names of all the men, counting their heads. This line, interpreted by another Hasidic teaching, Ginzei Yosef, teaches us that lifting up our heads doesn't just mean counting us, it means raising us up to connect to our highest root. And the counting of our names demonstrates the sacred quality hidden in the letters that make up our names, which point to and illuminate the sacred life force within each and every one of us. Your name is not random, it's holy. Just as we are all comprised of cells, of molecules, a mystical approach would say that we are also all comprised of letters. The letters of your name shine forth. Rabbi Arthur Green, commenting on this teaching, reminds us that each and every one of us has a unique light shining in upon us from the source of all life. Moses, or the inner sage, is called upon us to lift us up towards that source. Building on this letter energy, think about each and every one of us has our own letter energy. There's a teaching that says that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, corresponding to the 600,000 Israelite God-wrestling souls. Now, if we were to actually count the amount of letters in the Torah, it would be just a little over half that number. And I say just a little bit over because there are different ways that people count depending on which source they use. But in this teaching, in order to get to the 600,000 number, we will also count not just the letters, but the vowels that accompany the letters. And we know that in Hebrew, the vowels are not letters, but they are signs that come above and below the text. And though our tradition teaches us that there are 600,000 general souls, these soul sparks are divided up and found within each and every one of us. And so for me, this teaching reminds me of a much greater connectivity among all sentient beings. We all have a share in these 600,000 foundational souls. And this is how I want to see my Torah. And in order for me to do so, I must approach this journey, this exploration into the Torah, with renewal, humility, and joy, hinted at in the first line of this book. Our Torah, given in the wilderness, teeming with hidden wisdom, a wisdom available to all who wish to seek and to learn. And we are the letters of this wisdom when we place her teachings into right action. Each of us a letter of Torah, each of us equally needed to complete the holy whole. Bamidbar Rabbah, the legendary commentary on this book, directs us to make ourselves open to all, literally ownerless, like the wilderness. If we can't make ourselves like the wilderness, we are not able to acquire wisdom, to acquire Torah. This is why our Torah is given in the wilderness of Sinai. For me, this is why we have a census in the beginning of Bamidbar, of this book, in the wilderness, because each one of us counts. Each one of us is vital in this journey. When I read the words, lift up their heads and count, immediately I think about my posture, right? When I lift up my head, I lengthen my spine, I drop my shoulders back and down, and the front of my chest and my heart open up. In this way, I am reminded of my connection to the source of all light that shifts my posture and outlook from being closed off to open and receiving like the wilderness. It is with this physical and mental posture we move through the wilderness. When we can move in this way, and it takes a lot of practice and reminders, we become ready to receive wisdom. It is in this way of being that we invite God to dwell amongst us, to journey alongside us. Sinai, whose letters share the same numerical value as the Hebrew word sulam, meaning ladder, teaches us that when we become like Sinai, like the wilderness, we make space for a ladder to emerge and the divine to enter. Experiencing this Sinai mountain ladder depends on our speech and our actions. What we say and do here, how we say what we say and do determines whether or not a divine ladder will be revealed. If we cannot make ourselves open and receptive like the wilderness, we will not be able to find Mount Sinai. If we cannot find Mount Sinai, we cannot all come together, each one of us, a letter in the sacred scroll. It's all connected. If we are fighting, bickering, killing one another, why would God want to draw down that Sinai ladder for us to cleave to? If we can't link the letters of Torah to the souls of all beings, and we can't live a life full of humility, joy, and renewal together, Sinai will remain a silo unto herself, hidden away in a wilderness that will truly become no man's land. And the unity that Sinai offers will be void, and God will avoid us. So we've entered into this last week. We are in this last week of the counting of the Omer journey. And this week is Malchut, where we channel the divine presence into our every moment. Rabbi Levi teaches us this final week is a time of integration. We are all called to open our hands and our hearts and wonder about the gifts we can bring into this world. And so we ask ourselves, how can I be of best service? We can all be of service when we recognize our own uniqueness and allow our lives to flow from that truth. We can be of service when we believe that every human being is a letter in a sacred scroll, and each letter depends upon the other in order to complete the story. We can be of service when we learn to empty ourselves like the wilderness and receive her wisdom. And as we journey now in Bamidbar towards the promised land, and now as Israel is facing tense and scary moments, I return to this wilderness teaching, which reminds me of who I need to be in order to enter the land. Humble, joyous, open, receptive. That this whole earth is a vast wilderness ready to teach us about love, peace, and coexistence. Every step that we take can be a step closer to Mount Sinai. Every step we take can be an opportunity to embrace these universal teachings. Every step we take is another moment to realize that we are all taking these steps together. Shabbat Shalom.